2 days ago, I walked you through how this international NGO, the Global Center on Adaptation, was quietly granted diplomatic-style immunity by President Ruto's government. We talked about how you can't sue them, you can't audit them, and not even the government can walk into their offices without permission. But today, I want to show you who really sits behind it. Because once you see this board, the billionaires, the bankers, and the power brokers, you will understand that this has nothing to do with Africa and everything to do with who profits from Africa. On paper, this organization is a climate organization, but look closer and you will find the fingerprints of the Gates Foundation, the IMF, and the World Bank, the same institutions that have shaped Africa's debt, food systems, and economic policies for decades. This NGO isn't about helping Africa adapt. It's about controlling what adaptation looks like, who funds it, and who cashes in. Because when global financiers, politicians, and private foundations sit at the same table and call it climate action, you know, it's not about saving Africa. It's about owning Africa's future, and we will not accept it. Let's start with the man pulling the strings. I know you guys want me to go straight to Gates Foundation, but not yet. Let's start with this man, Patrick Vakuyeng. Dutch-born, smooth-talking, deeply connected. He's the CEO and president of the Global Center on Adaptation, the man who sells climate resilience as the future of Africa. But last time we said he's not just any CEO. He also happens to be the chancellor of the University of Nairobi. Maybe, becoming chancellor wasn't the goal. Maybe it was a way in, a bridge between his foreign organization and Kenya's most important academic and policy institution. Because from that position, Patrick is not just influencing climate projects, he's shaping how Kenyans think, teaches, and talks about climate adaptation itself. And then we have this guy, Ban Ki-moon. I'm going to call Ban Ki-moon the legitimizer. I know, right? This former Secretary General of the United Nations is a name that instantly disarms doubt. When people hear Ban Ki-moon, they think of peace missions, global diplomacy, and moral authority. And that's exactly the point. His presence makes the Global Center on Adaptation look like an arm of the UN. I mean, official, trustworthy, beyond reproach, right? But here's the truth. Global Center on Adaptation is not a UN body. It is a private international organization registered in the Netherlands, run by its own board, accountable to no public institution. And also, Ban Ki-moon doesn't represent the UN here. He lends his face, not his mandate. And that is where the genius and the danger lies. By placing Ban Ki-moon at the top as honorary chair, Global Center on Adaptation gains instant global legitimacy. I mean, no one questions a project that has the world's former top diplomat on its letterhead, would you? I mean, you see Ban Ki-moon there and you are like, okay. His name acts like a seal of purity. It neutralizes criticism before it even starts. It's not that Ban Ki-moon is doing anything illegal or malicious. It's that his reputation becomes the perfect shield for an institution now operating without public oversight. Because would you ever think to investigate an organization blessed by the presence of Ban Ki-moon? No, that's how perception becomes protection. Ban Ki-moon doesn't have to attend every meeting or review every deal. His very association turns Global Center on Adaptation into something untouchable. And that is the quiet brilliance of this setup. The world sees a UN statesperson at the helm and assumes transparency. And while the organization beneath him enjoys immunity, tax exemptions, and diplomatic privileges on Kenyan soil, no one will question. So yes, Ban Ki-moon is just here to bring prestige. But then again, shouldn't he be the same person who is asking, why should we actually have an immunity if whatever this organization is doing is fair? Why? Prestige without accountability is a weapon. It will silence scrutiny, it will sanitize power, and it will convince the world that something private is somehow public, you know, that it's not political, this is pure, this is UNish, if you get what I mean. But let's move to this person who I think is on this list by mistake. And I think they genuinely needed an African at this point, because after this guy, the rest of the Africans you'll see are just puppets. Let's talk about Macky Sall, the African face of power in this whole dynamic, right? This is the former president of Senegal, a seasoned statesman, respected across Africa, and now the chair of Global Center on Adaptation Supervisory Board. On paper, you know, he's the African anchor, the man meant to give the organization a local voice, a familiar face, and some sense of continental ownership. But behind that symbolism lies something far more strategic. Macky Sall's presence helps Global Center on Adaptation look African. Even when its power remained Western, they needed a black man here to make sure that this organization is African to the core. He connects the dots between African governments, the African Development Bank. At this point, by the way, I'm thinking we really need to investigate the African Development Bank, you know, and the foreign financiers who actually control the money. This guy is the bridge, but he's not the driver. So when Global Center on Adaptation and the African Development Bank launched the African Adaptation Acceleration Program, the one you've seen Gladys Wanga and the likes, yeah? A $25 billion plan for climate resilience, Macky Sall was the perfect messenger. That is why they are carrying this guy everywhere they are going, because he gives this organization credibility. He can speak to presidents and prime ministers in their own language, frame adaptation as an African dream, and make it sound like Africa was actually leading the change. We are the ones in control here. We are the ones in charge. But in reality, the money, rules, and metrics still flow from where? Washington and Netherlands, not here Nairobi or Senegal. No, that is why his role matters. Not because he controls the institution, but because he humanizes it. He makes foreign influence look like African leadership, and he gives the board a story, one that says, we are not imposing on Africa. Africa is part of this. I mean, look, we have Macky, we have this guy. And yet, the irony is very hard to miss. The same Macky Sall who once defended Senegal's sovereignty on the world stage now chairs a board where African nations have no real voting power. He doesn't decide which countries get climate funds. No, he doesn't. He doesn't sign off on budgets or partnerships. No. All he does is represent, but he doesn't rule. Now, in many ways, his appointment is Global Center on Adaptation's masterstroke, you know. Put an African at the front and the rest of the world will stop asking hard questions. You know, because once you see a black face on the banner, you assume the agenda is ours. We are the ones in control. We are in charge. But representation without control is not power. It is performance. If you really believe in what you're standing for, make this guy the man who controls all these things, right? Because Macky Sall's position exposes a lot. How the Global Center on Adaptation turns African visibility into global credibility, while keeping real authority in the hands of those who built it in the Netherlands. Come on, don't play with us. Then, I'll now talk to you about someone I would love to call the corporate green banker. And this is Fiki C.G. Besma. Yeah? That is our corporate green banker. This is the man who is co-chairing the Global Center on Adaptation beside Macky Sall. But he's not a politician, he's not a humanitarian, he's a billionaire industrialist. The former CEO of DSM, one of the biggest biotech and food system companies in Europe. Why? You know, under this guy's leadership, DSM became a global powerhouse in what is called the nutritional solutions, you know, vitamins, food fortification, animal feeds, and biotechnology. Anyway, behind that polite language is a powerful truth. DSM's fortune was built by controlling the science of food. Seeds, supplements, synthetic proteins, the very things that decide what Africans eat, grow, and export. We've had powerful conversations here on our seed sovereignty and food security. We've had powerful conversation here. And then you see this man who is at the center of majority of it all has moved from running a company that sells food technology to co-chairing an organization that shapes Africa's climate and agricultural policies. Do you see the danger? Do you see the danger? He's no longer just selling products. He's helping design the systems that will determine which solutions Africans must adapt. And we will have no choice. Because when the man designing the policy also profits from the industry that supplies it, that is not climate action. That is corporate capture to the fullest. Fakey also sits on or advises a long list of so-called sustainability boards, including the World Economic Forum, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, and partnerships with the World Food Programme and UNICEF. Almost every one of these initiatives operates heavily in Africa, and yet we are still to see the results or the accomplishment of what these organizations have achieved. They frame their work around ending hunger or improving nutrition, but their model depends on replacing traditional African foods with patented, those industrial substitutes, fortified flours, lab-engineered vitamins, and imported supplements. In short, the same man who helped Western companies make billions from Africa's hunger now sits at the table deciding how Africa should adapt to climate change. That is why Africans should be actually paying attention to this. Because when the Global Center on Adaptation talks about climate-smart agriculture or food resilience, whose resilience are they talking about? No. You have the African farmer trying to survive drought. That is not it. Obviously, they are talking about the corporation waiting to sell drought-proof seeds to these African farmers. So whose economy are we actually saving? The local community or the shareholders outside in these foreign companies? No. Fakey represents a shift, the privatization of climate justice. He speaks the language of sustainability, but his logic is the same as every empire before him. Control the food and you control the people. And now, through the Global Center on Adaptation, that control is moving quietly into policy. The laws, programs, and partnerships that will define Africa's future food systems. And that's the real risk, because the next generation of colonialism won't come through soldiers or settlers. No, we said they are not coming with guns anymore. It will come through CEOs who call themselves saviors. Take this. This is what you need as Africans. And now, to the most awaited person, I know you guys have been asking, Lynn, when will you talk about this guy? Yeah, Roger Vuyas. Wait till you see the Gates connection, right? Now, Rogers, when we say Roger Vuyas, this is definitely a name most people have never heard, but one that sits at the heart of almost every big development decision in Africa. He's the president for Global Growth and Opportunity at the Gates Foundation, and he also sits on the supervisory board of the Global Center on Adaptation. That one connection alone should make Africans pause, because the Gates Foundation isn't just a donor. It is one of the most influential private institutions shaping African agriculture, health, and education, and I dare say in a negative way. And now, through Rogers, it has a direct hand in shaping Africa's climate adaptation agenda. And here's what that means in plain language. The same foundation that has spent years funding AGRA, we've spoken about AGRA before, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, is now helping to guide Global Center on Adaptation, the organization designing Africa's climate future. AGRA's model, we've spoken about it, is very clear. Replace traditional African seed systems with improved hybrid seeds from corporate suppliers. Promote commercial fertilizers and pesticides and move smallholder farmers into global supply chains. Has it happened? No. It is a model that benefits the multinationals, not African farmers. We spoke about the Monsantos, the Bayers, all those. And the results speak for themselves. After more than a decade of AGRA, with billions in donor support, independent evaluations have found that hunger rates in many target countries hasn't dropped. Well, small-scale farmers now are left suffering. They are more dependent on expensive inputs such as fertilizers, seeds, and pesticides. And they are very vulnerable to price shocks because these things are not African. We spoke about how we don't get these seeds from Africa. These seeds are patented. The fertilizers are not ours. The pesticides are not ours. And the farmer cannot replant their own seeds. Because again, we've done away with our indigenous seeds, the ones that we could replant, right? Now you have to keep going and buying these seeds. And who benefits? Show me a local company that is actually selling new seeds. So instead of the Global Center on Adaptation, rethinking and saying, okay, Gates Foundation have probably worked with people who are definitely failing, then they've just embraced. They've embraced this. And listen closely to the language. They talk about climate smart agriculture or resilient farming systems. All these complicated things, right? But these are different terms, but same meaning. They all lead to a version of farming that depends on patented seeds, data platforms, and corporate partnerships. These are systems ordinary farmers cannot control. And then when you trace the funding, it all loops back to the same place. The Gates Foundation finances who AGRA. And then now through Rogers, it helps shape the direction of both. That is not partnership. What partnership is the Gates Foundation having with the Global Center on Adaptation? No, these people are not even partnering. They are consolidating power. I was actually thinking this morning, even as Kenyans celebrated the withdrawal of the immunity to the Gates Foundation, did we achieve anything? Because look at how these organizations are now marching together. Look at how they are marching together. Rogers' role inside the Global Center on Adaptation gives Gates a direct voice in how Africans' adaptation money is spent, which agricultural models get promoted, and which companies benefit from them. They are on top. The control is right there. And the fact that this is happening in Nairobi, where AGRA's headquarters are located, and now GCA, the Global Center on Adaptation, is here. They are going to build their 1.7 billion office and host our Ministry of Environment. Look, and our Nairobi now is East Africa's donor capital. This is not an accident. This is by design. Because whoever controls the narrative of climate resilience also controls the flow of billions in adaptation funding, and by extension, the future of African farming. So when you see Rogers' name on the Global Center on Adaptation board, please remember this. This is not just another partnership. It is the merging of two systems that already dominate African agriculture, now expanding their reach under the cover of climate action. And if history has taught us anything, it's that every time Africa's food systems become dependent on outsiders, sovereignty disappears, one harvest at a time. Please, and you don't believe, tell me why you can't replant your own seeds. I cry for my continent because I don't know how the next 10 years are going to look like. We won't control, we won't even control anything. These things have been really calculated. And to us, you just see a new chancellor of Nairobi University and you are like, okay. But you don't see the mask. You don't see that the goal is to get this guy here to lead this whole climate resilience BS. Anyway, let's move to Francis Suarez, the American connector. I knew we had to have an American in this. Eh? You know, this is one name that will make a lot of people pause. Francis Suarez, the mayor of Miami, sitting right at the top of the Global Center on Adaptation Supervisory Board. What does the mayor of an American city have to do with Africa's climate future? What? I know you're about to say nothing, but no, there is a lot actually. Miami is one of the world's front lines of climate change. A city flooding from rising seas and monster storms. Things are crashing. But it is also turning that crisis into business. Under Suarez, Miami has rebranded itself as a climate tech capital, attracting billionaires, startups, and global investors who see money in fighting or adapting to climate change. He speaks the language of investors, not activists. No. And that is exactly why the Global Center on Adaptation wanted him on their list. That is why they wanted him, because he connects the organization directly to US money. We are talking Wall Street banks, you know, and venture funds that are looking for new places to invest in. And through him, the board doesn't just talk about helping vulnerable nations. No, this thing has nothing to do with Africa. It talks about building markets out of those vulnerabilities. You fools, continue thinking we are here to help you, but And this is why it gets complicated for Africa. Because the same investors chasing green opportunities in Miami are now eyeing African land, water, and forest as the big climate assets. To them, a forest isn't home to people. That is why no one cares about the indigenous people of the Mau forest. No. A forest is not a home to the people. It is a carbon credit, right? A drought zone is not a tragedy. It is a resilience project. It is a new way of making profit from survival. Suarez gives that model legitimacy. He is a respected American mayor, a bridge between politics and private capital, you know, someone who can convince the world that adaptation isn't just about compassion, it is also about returns. And for the Global Center on Adaptation, that is very useful. It helps sell Africa's climate story to the same financiers who helped create the crisis in the first place. See, we talked the other day about how we only contribute to the 4% of emissions. So when you see Suarez's name high on the Global Center on Adaptation board, please don't dismiss it as random. He's not just a guy smiling for the camera. No, he's not there also because of science or policy. He's there because he opens the money gates. And when climate policy starts speaking the language of profit, it's not really about saving the planet anymore. It's about turning survival into business. You know, and honestly, even if you do a poll, this whole carbon credit and this whole climate crisis, climate change, climate hangover, this is a conversation only understood by a few. And they are banking on it. They are banking, you know, we are there thinking about, is what Burale did. They are banking, sisi tutapiga hii story mpaka next year. They are banking on it because they don't think we are too smart for this climate thing. No, they are banking on it. But you know, Africans must understand, the mayor of Miami is not coming to help us plant trees. No, he's coming to help investors plant their stakes using our own resources. And then we have Shemara. I honestly do not want to butcher the second name. I'll call this the banker in the shadows, right? Quiet, polished, and incredibly powerful. She's the CEO of Maguire Group, a global investment bank based in Australia. Guys, up to this point, let me ask you a question. Have you seen a Kenodia? Have you seen an Otieno? God damn it. Have you seen a Koske in this whole thing? Even you are like, man, who are these guys? Who are these guys? And this was supposed to be designed with Africans in mind. Yeah. You know, I've also noticed when it comes to these boards, people don't also go and check who sits at these boards. Who are the decision makers? No. Us, we just want to end the conversation on these guys have been granted diplomatic style immunity. But we seriously do not want to go and check on who sits on these boards. Because I'm yet to see even a South African here. And this is supposed to help Africa move forward. If you saw Patrick speaking during that car launch with Ruto, you would think this guy, even he spoke in Swahili, helping us feel at home, But let's go back to this woman. If you've never heard of Macquarie, think of it as the Goldman Sachs of climate finance, a bank that doesn't just invest in projects, it buys into entire systems. Macquarie has built an empire on green money. We are talking about renewable energy infrastructure and now carbon markets. It's one of the largest asset managers in the world, holding over $600 billion in investment. And increasingly, it sees Africa as the next big frontier for carbon trading and renewable projects. Here's how that works. When Western companies want to offset their emissions, they buy carbon credits, essentially paying to claim climate progress by funding tree planting, soil conservation, and the rest in developing countries, right? Those projects sound noble. I mean, you guys remember we had a whole tree planting holiday, and we were like, yeah, let us actually plant the trees. But in practice, these projects often mean locking up African land for decades, restricting how local people can graze, farm, or even live, and to allow a corporation in Europe or Australia to keep polluting. So, us guys, we want to conserve, and they are doing this. I mean, again, I'll keep referring you to the show we did in Kajiado, where those guys were almost getting evicted so that, we can conserve this and pay you kidogo money for carbon credits. They're already doing it. And this is exactly where Shemara's world intersects with the Global Center on Adaptation. Kenya's new carbon market regulations, the same ones tied to the privileges and immunities order, create a legal structure that makes the country a haven for such deals. It is a system that lets foreign investors buy long-term rights over land-based carbon projects. And now, thanks to the immunity, organizations like the Global Center on Adaptation can broker, advise, and coordinate these deals with limited oversight. So, if Global Center on Adaptation decides to take over Kakamega Forest because they want to conserve, by the way, we have no right to ask, so how much did you sell it to Macquarie for? How much money? No, because again, you can't even audit these people's record. Macquarie can fund a project that the Global Center on Adaptation designs. Then, Global Center on Adaptation can certify that project as adaptation or climate positive. And when Kenyan communities complain, nobody can touch this organization or take them to courts. Not even the government or even the media. By the way, have you asked why even local media, mainstream media is not reporting about this? If someone told me Nation has reported, Standard, where are you? We need you. We know you put these things as they are. Anyway, that's what immunity looks like in practice. It's not about diplomacy. It's about risk protection for investors. Shemara's role on the board is not just random. She represents the future that the Global Center on Adaptation legal shields were built for. The quiet merging of public policy and private profit. And you guys will never know because, again, you cannot audit. So, where our government is here providing legitimacy, the NGO is providing cover, and the banks are providing what? The money. And if you look closely, it's already happening across the continent. In Zambia, Mozambique, and Tanzania, large chunks of land have been converted into what? Carbon projects, where local people can no longer farm freely. In Kenya, we've spoken about it. Similar concerns have been raised around these large tracts of land and forest-based offset schemes. That's the model. As we just provide the land, all we are doing as Africans is providing the land. And that is actually what I want you to understand. We are providing the land, and then these corporations will provide the capital. And people like Shemara will design the contracts that will make everyone else powerless. So when you see her name on the Global Center on Adaptation board, don't just think of a banker. Think of a system, one that turns climate action into a business, and African land is the collateral. No, the next climate war won't be fought over oil. You won't see countries fighting over oil. It will be fought over who controls the carbon and who gets to profit from the air above our land. Guys, take these things seriously. The air you breathe, you guys will have to pay for it. I'm coming to the end of the who is who before I bring you the puppets, the African presidents, because they are there at the bottom of the barrel of this thing. But first, let's talk about Jean-Peter and Jose Antonio. Two names that may not mean much to ordinary Africans. By the way, we are not meant to understand who these people are. But they represent the backbone of how Western influence sustains itself in global institutions. Jean-Peter is no lightweight. He is a former Prime Minister of the Netherlands. Hello, Netherlands entered the chart. Yay! The very country where the Global Center on Adaptation was born, funded, and it's still legally registered, right? Now, as Prime Minister, he was a close ally of the Dutch royal family and the architects of the Netherlands' climate and foreign aid agenda. Today, he sits comfortably inside the Global Center on Adaptation's executive board, lending it the authority of Dutch politics, even as the Dutch government itself distances from the Global Center on Adaptation financially. And that's the irony. Oneni venye tunachezwa. The same country pulling its money out still has one of its most respected politicians keeping the organization's reputation intact. He doesn't need to visit Nairobi or walk through the Rift Valley or influence Kenya's climate path. No, his role is very diplomatic, the kind that opens doors in Europe ministries, unlock donor grants, and reassure investors that the Global Center on Adaptation is credible. Look at me. I'm a former Prime Minister and I believe in the vision. So if all of you believe in the vision, why do you need immunity? Why don't you want your organization audited, scrutinized? Why don't you want to pay taxes if you believe in what you're doing? No. When this ex-Prime Minister signs a document or attends a meeting in Brussels, that signal alone can move millions of euros in climate funding. That is soft power, guys. Influence without presence. May that day reach for us where the name Lynn Ngugi can just be there, but I don't gotta be there. But beside him is this guy, Jose Antonio Mede, the former Minister of Finance and Foreign Affairs of Mexico. Now Mexico has entered the chart. This man is not only now on the Global Center on Adaptation's board, he is also deeply embedded in the World Bank and IMF circles. I knew it. I knew World Bank and IMF. There is no way we just gave immunity to a random thing. No. Mede served under multiple Mexican presidents, managed billion-dollar portfolios, and later held senior advisory roles in multilateral banks. He brings the Global Center on Adaptation the language of global finance, fiscal discipline, creditworthiness, and policy alignment. In other words, he's the bridge that keeps the institution in step with international lenders. And together, Jean-Peter and Mede form what you might call the old guard of global diplomacy. Respectable, experienced, and perfectly placed to make the Global Center on Adaptation appear trustworthy in the eyes of Western governments and financial institutions. Now, these people, they don't build projects or meet the communities. They will not come here and meet the Ogiek people. No. They will not meet the Ogiek people. They build comfort, the kind that convinces donor countries their money is very safe, even when no one knows how it's used on the ground. That is the real function, to sanitize power, to make sure the system of global adaptation funding looks stable and legitimate, even when the accountability disappears. These two people's signatures will travel faster than any border. Their endorsements are very important. No, you continue complaining, but you are not as equally important than these two people. You just continue complaining. And also, their silence will speak loud than any African voice in the room. I know they are watching this and they are like, who is this stupid girl that is just... Guys, I'm equally useless to these people as you are. No, we are all useless in the presence of these people. They are the OGs. You know, these are the men who make exploitation look like cooperation. Yes, I said that. And then, at the bottom of the barrel, if you think I'm lying, go to the website. Look at where people like William Ruto, Samia Suluhu, John Mahama, and Umaru, look at where they are placed. They actually lined up beside each other, smiling for the cameras. Yeah, let me tell you, you have a random guy at the top there, and then you just have presidents here, in very too small, like 4 of them in a line, smiling there like fools, you know. But you know, to someone who does not know, this looks like African leadership finally has a seat at the table. But where is the truth? This table has already been set, and the important people who are sitting on it. By the way, these African presidents were just invited for the photos, you know, not the decisions, photo ops. This council is advisory in name only. These guys will not control the money, they will not approve the projects, and they will not decide where adaptation funding goes as who. The real power in all this sits in the supervisory and executive boards, where you have the bankers, the donors, and Western financiers, you know, who are writing the rules. This supervisory's job, the presidents here, all these guys you're seeing here, they are just here to make the Global Center on Adaptation look inclusive. That is all they are here to do. So if you're watching this from Ghana and you go and you see your president is there, you'll be like, okay, but my president is here, so he must trust this. So why is your president not the one on top there, making decisions for the African continent? Why do you have a foreigner coming here to make decisions for the African continent? No. This whole section here is just here to tell the world that Africa is leading. But in reality, we are being led. Where is the lie? Who sits at the top? They will offer you this language of representation. But look at this system. Have we not established that it's built on exclusion? Your guys here are just the political faces that sell the illusion of African ownership. But the contracts, conditions, and accountability remain firmly in the hands of those who fund it. I mean, take our one-term guy, for example, Ruto. To him, the Global Center on Adaptation is a trophy, a proof that Kenya is the climate capital of Africa. You know, he calls it a co-host arrangement, but in reality, this is transfer of control. By allowing the Global Center on Adaptation to host Kenya's Ministry of Environment inside their Nairobi offices, you know, Ruto already blurred the line between governance and influence. Because how can, again, a ministry regulate an institution that physically houses it? We all said last time, no, that won't work. And then you also have someone like Mia Motali there from Barbados, a very respected voice on climate justice. People like Suluhu, all of them are there just posing for the photos, clueless about the money and the decisions. All they are doing is adding credibility to the Global Center on Adaptation's African narrative. And that is why you are seeing them in high-level panels. They are signing joint statements and they are calling for adaptation finance. Well, their own people on the ground do not even understand what carbon credit is. They have no vote in the Global Center on Adaptation's budget, no oversight. over its deals, no access to its books, nothing, nada. Anyway, see, when you see those people there, definitely this will neutralize criticism. You'll be like, oh, Lynn, our president is there, so chill, girl. Huh? If anyone questions the Global Center on Adaptation's power, they can say, how can it be foreign controlled when African presidents sit on the council? Advisory council, my people, not executive. No, they are not decision makers. They are shields. They are puppets. You know, they're just shields. And shields are meant to protect, not question. So when you see the long list of global leaders, please remember this. It is not about participation. It is about perception. It is about creating the image of African agency, you know, while quietly removing its substance. There is nothing we are doing here. The leaders just bring political legitimacy, and once their names are attached, no one will ask who actually makes the rules. No one, because you will think they also contribute to making the rules. No, that is how soft power works. It doesn't silence you, it flatters you, it puts your name and your photo on this organization so that you look powerful, but you have nothing, you have no authority. You have no authority, you have zero. Zero. All right? And that is what this council really is. A carefully curated illusion of equality that hides a structure of control. Because while Africans' presidents are there taking pictures, the financiers, the donors, and the corporate strategists behind the scenes are there taking the profits. And now that you've seen the faces, you can see the pattern. None of them, Patrick Vakuyeng, Ban Ki-moon, Macky Sall, Fakey, Roger, Shemara, all these people that are there, some we've not even spoken about. You know, they are just there. They know what they are doing there. They know. Each of them represents a pillar of global power, politics, money, and corporations and image. Together, they've built something polished and very powerful. A system that looks African on the outside, but it is controlled from somewhere else. And yet, the people who live with the consequences are nowhere in the room. I mean, why don't we have someone like Ogada? If honestly this is real, why don't we have someone like Mordecai there? Because honestly, if I saw Mordecai, I would be like, okay, I know my guy can't be bought. And he has fought for this, and he knows what we are talking about, and he knows what Africa needs. So why is he not there? Why can't we see Maasai elders here? Why? Why can't we see people from Tanzania? Why can't we see local people here helping with the decisions? Why can't we see small farmers here? Because it is their land that is going to be turned into a carbon project. So where are they? Their voices are missing. Their positions have been replaced by donors, bankers, and diplomats deciding what is good for Africa. You see, this thing actually annoys me because it also tells you we cannot make our own climate decisions. No. And that is how quiet control works. You don't need to own the land to rule it. You know, just define how it's valued. You know, and you don't need to run a country to shape it. Just sit where the money flows and make the decisions. Through adaptation finance and green partnerships, old power is being repackaged as progress. This is the new colonialism. It sounds noble, but the result is familiar. Africa loses control, one contract at a time. When Kenya gave the Global Center on Adaptation immunity, it wasn't just signing paperwork, it was sending a message. It told the world that foreign institutions can now operate here without being answerable to us. And when those institutions are now run by Western financiers and political elites, that is not partnership. That's a new kind of oversight that is dressed up as collaboration, and we will not have it. Let's be honest. What is really adapting here isn't the climate. It is our sovereignty that is being sold again as we watch. As we are busy out there calling each other tribal. Because we've said, you know, someone is selling our country to the highest buyer. We are being told, oh no. No. No, 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 no. Again, we've sold our land. We've given our ownership, our land ownership, everything that we own again is back to the hands of foreign control. No, guys, no. No. And that is why Africans must stay alert. Because the people closest to the droughts, the floods, and the famines deserve more than speeches and advisory seats. They also deserve a real say in their future. They deserve to be on that board and say, this is not how we want to be represented. Until that happens, this won't be adaptation, it will be submission. You know, this whole green climate is a hoax if Africans are not given the right seat at this table. Or actually, Africans, make your own table. Did we really have to wait for a guy from the Netherlands to come be a chancellor at Nairobi University and then establish his strong connection here with the Global Center on Adaptation so that now finally someone can listen to us? No. No. Guys, before these people tell you that this is about saving the planet, please ask them, whose planet are you saving? And at whose expense? Because when the same hands that polluted the world now claim to be fixing it through Africa, you should always follow the money. If adaptation means Africans losing land, if these partnerships means outsiders getting immunity, and if climate finance means we stay poor while others trade our air for profit, apana, this is not justice. This is exploitation. This is colonialism. This is whatever name you want to call it. And we are not against climate action. No, we are not. But we are very much against climate control. Let me remind you, our ancestors knew how to maneuver the climate. We knew how to till our lands. We understood the irrigation. We understood that floods are coming. We knew. We knew, by the way. And we are not against climate action. But now, when it becomes another way to own what we were never meant to sell, our land, our resources, and our future, we will say no. Please don't just watch this now. Read the fine print. Go to these websites. Scrutinize the board and ask who benefits. Who signs this and who is protected? The fight for climate justice will not be won in boardrooms or even here with us just talking. No, it will be won here on African soil by people who refuse to be silent while their continent is quietly being sold in the name of saving it. No, we will not accept this at all, at all, at all. Look at the joke in the decision makers. Look at the joke in the Africans who are there. Look at the joke. That is a joke. That even the decision makers have no African smell in them. That is a big joke. And guys, we are actually late. We caught this so late. We caught this whole immunity BS so late. These people were ahead of us. That is why some guy became the chancellor of Nairobi University. And we clapped without asking, what is the goal? By the way, how is this guy also going to run now the University of Nairobi with all these things happening? How is he going to do it? How is he going to actually help us? How is he going to be of impact? Or it's just the name we needed. We needed a foreign chancellor to be at the head of the University of Nairobi. So we seem cool, you know. I've seen people have already started talking. I knew the government bloggers would not be quiet. I knew when you talk about Gates or the Gates Foundation, you know you run a risk of being cancelled, etc., etc. Guys, this is the fear they sell you. I know in this country we have influencers, people who have mass following, that if they decide today we are going to join hands and we are going to call out this BS, their followers will definitely rally behind them. You cannot just be a performative activist. No. You need to be an activist when it matters, and it matters right now. I'm not going to force any influencer to use their platforms to advocate or to create awareness. No, people have different goals. But please, our own continent is going as we watch. You know, these presidents know they won't be here in a couple of years. Climate conversation, this whole thing is God, there's so much money in this that to them maybe it's just about the money. How much can I make before I exit? And these people are not even, some of the people like even Uhuru Kenyatta are not innocent. I saw Uhuru Kenyatta at the, you know, that fund that was given by the Global Center on Adaptation. I saw him. So as we will be here talking about the Wamunyoros, the Rutos, the Kenyattas, but these guys behind the closed door, they all know what they are doing and they all have a common goal. Please tukuleni yetu kabla tutoke. I have personally been in the field where I have documented stories of people whose land was just about to go in the name of carbon credits. And had the youths not come out and protested, right now they would just be passing and saying that used to be ours. But now because there's a 40-year lease that we can't, you know, we can't take our animals here. We actually can't do anything here. We can't do that. And the harm it causes our community. Our community knew how to exist with nature. This whole climate crisis is being made to look as if Africans have no knowledge on it. Like we are so dumb, we don't understand, you know. And they are counting on 15 years for us to be able to catch up. Today, if there is anything you can do, go and scrutinize the Global Center on Adaptation. And I will still dare the CEO and the Chancellor of Nairobi University, Patrick, if you think what you are doing in this continent, if you think that your organization deserves immunity, if you think that your organization deserves not to be scrutinized, come and sit here and explain to everyone what we are looking forward to. Otherwise, the rest is just BS. The rest is just BS. And I want to take this opportunity to thank every one of you that watched that video. They count on these topics being too technical for you. But look at you. Look at you how you are shining on the comment sections, putting 1 + 1 together. Go out there, share this video, talk about it so that they can see how educated you are. Actually, please show them why you know Africa more than they do. We will not be taught about climate as if our ancestors did not know climate. No. No. To them, this is an opportunity to make money and then exit. But the damage, when you have people who can't access their land for 40 years because there is a lease, that you know we are conserving this place, we are conserving this forest, we are conserving the Mau. You people, you are damaging the Mau. Where are those people supposed to go? Were they not doing that way before this whole climate change and climate? We are not against. We are actually not against this, but we are going to say you will not control us through climate. You will not think these conversations are complicated. We will actually dedicate our time to making sure that every episode, once in a week, we have an episode here that we are talking about climate change. For Africans by Africans. And I challenge people like Mordecai, raise your voice. I know you've raised your voice a lot of times, and I know sometimes this gets tiring. When you continue educating people, you're even writing books and you think people don't care. They care, they are listening. So don't be quiet now. Raise your voice. Because people like you, when you talk to us about African matters, we will listen. But we will not listen to a Dutch guy coming to Africa and talking to us about climate change, where we don't even see any impactful African on the board, and we listen as who? As who? Go out there, get me cancelled, pay your bloggers like you started paying them to cancel me. Cancel, even go talk to whoever you need to talk to. Have this platform brought down. May only fear God. Get the hell out of here.